Hey friends, good to see you again. So let's continue to focus on our planets and composite houses series and talk about Mars in the composite houses today. So Mars is how we blend our aggression, our selfishness, our I want drive, the id, what is spontaneous, not always well thought out, our rashness, a big part of our immature ego, the part of our personality that rises up and reacts, that defends ourselves, that sometimes is aggressive. It's what's responsible for our need to survive. So how does that very human survival need and need to be supreme and to prevail, how does that combine in a relationship? So that's what Mars aspects tell us. How are we handling our temperamental differences or samenesses or ability to control ourselves or not? How is our selfishness combining in the relationship? And the house tells you where that action is occurring. Houses are territories of meaning. They are where the planet is doing its thing. So the planet is the action itself. The house is the context for that action. So when composite Mars is in the first house, you have to look at it in context of how Mars is aspected. Do we have butting heads? Do we have temperamental differences? Do we have difficult aspects from Mars to the Sun, Mars to Pluto, Mars to Uranus? Are there ways that our tempers are combining that are bringing out competitiveness? Are we vying to both drive the car? It can be harder to establish a leader-follower type of relationship, and that's very important in relationships. A lot of us do not understand the importance of the ability to have a passive and aggressive, a masculine-female, a leader-follower type of deal come up between the two of us. Because if we don't decide what that's going to be, it's like my horse Leo, who is an alpha horse, and he was at the stable that I got him from. I got him for free because he had a condition, he needed a home. But at the stable that he was at before he arrived here, he didn't have a pasture mate for years and years because he would not allow any other horse to be above him. He had to be the leader, and there was no other horse that they tried him out with that was willing to submit in the way that worked for both of them. So he was on his own for a long time. He was around other horses, but he didn't have a pasture mate until he met Cinch, the horse that I already had, brought him down there to see if they could get along. And they were able to establish a hierarchy. Cinch decided that Leo got to be the boss, and Leo was happy to be the boss, and they became friends. Within a couple of days, they were able to work it out, and I've had Leo now for 5 or 6 years, and they have a wonderful relationship. Leo is very attached to Cinch. Cinch is happy to have Leo for a leader, and they have no problems, other than Leo occasionally stealing Cinch's hay. Other than that, they have no problems. So it's so important in human behavior as well, because humans are hierarchy. You know what I'm saying. Humans are animals where we have a system of status. I can never say that word. Hierarchical. You know what I'm trying to say. So we have to decide who's going to lead and who's going to follow. And with Mars in the first house, that's very difficult to establish if we have difficult aspects to Mars, if we already have a competitiveness, if we already have the penchant to behave rashly with each other, if the id is really very much in control of the reactions in the relationship, then Mars in the first house is going to contribute to competitiveness, to not being able to decide who's going to drive the car, because there is only one steering wheel. And we can shift and change and renegotiate who's going to do the leader and who's going to be the follower. And in a lot of relationships, that's very situational. In some relationships, that's more concrete. It's just very well established. And you would hope that with Mars in the first house, that we have a relationship where there's some flexibility, where there's some patience, where there's the ability to not react instantaneously, to lose our cool. That's a lot of the problems that can contribute to Mars being in the first house. Now, if we have a relationship, again, where there is patience and we are able to have some foresight, objectivity, Mars in the first house can actually be quite good for a lot of people. They can feel like they have similar objectives, similar ways of going about things. They can look at a goal that they want to go after and act upon it in a way that is harmonious, that is more likely to get them what it is that they're looking for. So they have a similar hunting instinct for identifying what it is that they want going after it with Mars in the first house. But again, you have to look at aspects to see what does the temperamental match look like. Mars in the second house is typically a very good place to have Mars in a composite chart, because it means that we can combine our temperaments, our energies, our desire for supremacy in a way that accomplishes very tangible, typically material goals. So you have to look at aspects to Mars, because that could be frustrated and show up in the second house. Mars in difficult aspects, the context for that action, remember, is the second house. So we have to look and see, do we have selfishness, do we have rashness, do we have immaturity? And that's where it's going to be coming through, second house. If we have a Mars that is reasonably aspected, doesn't even have to be well aspected, but reasonably well aspected, and it comes into the second house, this is a more grounding place for Mars to be, because the way that we will combine temperaments and our hunting ability and our mutual need to win, we can win at stuff, possessions, collecting things, building material stability, money, finances. It's a very practical place for Mars to be. The two are fired up about the same kind of goals that can lead to stability. Needs that can bring material or physical security into the relationship. So it's a very practical place for Mars to be. Mars in the third house is a pretty darn good place to have it in a composite chart. There's a good blending when it comes to opinions, general perceptions about the world, how we think and process information, a conversation. Mars is stimulating the area of talking, conversation, mental sharing, and what goes on a daily basis, the little things. So there tends to be more chatting. We can be invigorated by each other when it comes to just daily life. We'll want to do things together. We'll want to participate in the little things, going out to the mailbox, going on a walk together. It's a very energetic place to have Mars. The third house is a very busy place. So we're bringing added energy and willpower and, the way that we combine our get up and go into the daily hours of our life. So there's more doing together, and it can increase the chances that there will be more conversation and that we will enjoy a lot of the same mundane types of things. Mars in the fourth house can be very good if Mars is well aspected. It's not a very noticeable place for Mars to be if we have good things going on, easy aspects to other planets. If we have tension, if we have ego conflicts, the types of difficult aspects that Mars is making, if there are any, will show up in the context of emotional stability between the two of us, intimacy within the home. It will be a very, very noticeable thing if Mars is in the fourth in difficult aspects. So there can be more fights about space, where money should go. Think about your classic bickering old couple, fighting over little things, fighting over everything. It's a very temperamental and potentially explosive area for Mars to be. There's going to be more domestic discord if we have difficult things going on. So patience is thin, and objectivity is not easy to come by if we have a difficultly aspected Mars in the fourth house. So it makes it more difficult in general to have a flowing, stable home life if we have conflicts with Mars. So it'll be very important to look at the individual aspects to Mars and see what is it we need to work out, what exactly are the nature of the conflicts, because again, that's going to show up very, very strongly in the home and when attempts at intimacy and peace are made. With Mars in the fifth house, we have very, very similar ways of reacting to pleasure and seeking pleasure and going after what it is that's going to bring us a sense of exhilaration or fun, how it is that we indulge in what we like and what we choose. So it's a more superficial place for Mars to be. It doesn't really tell us, do we have a deeper compatibility other than, the types of sensory enjoyment that we both mutually pursue. So good aspects or bad aspects to Mars. The fifth house, having Mars in the fifth house, it doesn't really seem to exacerbate the goodness or the badness that may be there. It's more of a neutral place to have difficult aspects. It's going to be more competitive having Mars in the fifth house. If we have difficult, like ego clashes, that could show up as more competitiveness because the nature of the fifth house that we're dealing with a planet Mars. It's naturally a fire planet coming into a fire house. But typically, Mars in the fifth house is a very good thing. People really enjoy it. They play well together. They pursue well together. The types of sexual content that we're looking for in our life tends to be more similar with Mars in the fifth house. We want the same things. It can be a really sexy, fun, encouraging placement to have for two people. It does exacerbate risk-taking, maybe pursuing things that on our own we wouldn't always have the courage to do. So in some more timid or, wallflower kind of personalities, this can bring out a little bit of fire in us, and that can be very good. If we have personalities that are already prone toward risky behavior, this can lend to that and sometimes might not always cause us to do the smartest things together. But all in all, it's a pretty darn fun place to have Mars. So when Mars comes into the sixth house, we're looking at issues of serving and taking because of the nature of Mars, the nature of the sixth house. Mars is a very selfish archetype. It's where it's all about me and I want, and then we have that blended I wantness coming into the sixth house of giving and service and going out of our way. So this tends to bring out the dominant selfish qualities in one partner and the more giving and Virgoan sixth house qualities of the other partner. So it can bring up some matters of humiliation, matters of the passive partner, the one taking more the sixth house role, feeling like they're doing all the giving. There isn't the reciprocal action that they would really prefer. Humiliation tends to be a big word that I hear a lot when people have composite Mars in the 6th house. And it's, again, that one partner that tends to bend and scrape in an effort to fulfill the more selfish, sometimes very difficult to fulfill needs of the person who's playing the role of Mars. So it would be important to look at aspects, because that's going to show you, do we already have a selfish or self-gratifying theme going on? If we do, that will find a foothold in the 6th house and exacerbate those issues. If we have a Mars that's aspected in, patiently, if we have the ability to, curb our tempers, if we have some patience, some objectivity, then we can work well together in the realm of 6th house things that we do together, improvements that we make, working around the house, working around the lawn. Mars is situated in an extremely practical place when it's in the 6th house. So that combined assertiveness and energy tends to find tasks to do. So we can work very, very well together with Mars in the 6th house. Beyond working relationships or cooperative relationships, it does tend to find an outlet or an expression with the more selfish and humiliated partner, finding their level and just falling into that role. Mars in the 7th house in a composite chart is a very good place to have it. There's a warmth, there's a sort of a mutual involvement that's really, really exciting and invigorating for each other. Both people are pursuing the relationship itself. The ways in which they combine their excitement, the way that they go after things, their impatience, it actually works very well in the context of the relationship. There's actually a very good temperamental match. Mars in the 7th house also cuts down on the amount of competitiveness, the amount of selfishness and pursuit of something that's just for one of us, because we're both mutually pursuing the partnership, the idea of partnership, of being together. So Mars can be a very a relationship affirming thing when it comes into the 7th house. There's like a mutual purpose or goal or idea of winning when it comes to the success of the relationship itself. Now, if we have Mars in a very difficult aspect to the Sun or Pluto, not so much Uranus. It seems to be the Sun and Pluto mostly that are the culprits when it comes to infusing difficulties into Mars in the 7th house, because we'll have those the rashness, ego clashes and conflicts. That will show up in the context of the relationship. That will show up in the context of trying to be better at the relationship. The competitiveness will be a thing if we have difficult aspects, but it tends to be very specific to the Sun or to Pluto. So if we don't have that, and Mars is itself in the 7th, even in difficult aspects to other planets other than the Sun or to Pluto, it tends to be a darn good place for it to be. Composite Mars in the 8th house brings more complexity than Mars does in other places. There does tend to be a lot of sexual attraction, a lot of insistence when it comes to our biology really driving us to be together. There isn't as much regard for the other person's feelings or the other person's position when Mars comes into the composite 8th. It's more about self-gratification through the use of the other person. So you want to look and see, do we already have a more self-serving kind of composite chart going on? Because Mars in the 8th house will enhance that. if we have a Neptunian theme in the relationship and then Mars comes into the 8th, especially if Mars is an aspect to Neptune itself, that can increase the use of each other. And we will not see it as such, at least not in the beginning. It will seem more like there's a richness of compatibility. It may not actually be there. The drive to get with each other, to have some kind of sexual relationship when Mars comes into the 8th house, clouds the judgment very, very heavily. There's just like this race to the bottom, and neither one of us is operating out of our most wisdom-filled self with Mars in the 8th house. It's a more animalistic placement. So our instinct to win the prizes, to plunder the treasures of the other person is very strong with Mars in the 8th house. So look to aspects. Do we already have selfishness? Do we already have the tendency to want to take from each other? If those things are there, then we're going to increase the chances that we could use each other to our own end when Mars comes into the 8th house. When Composite Mars is in the 9th house, this is a very stimulating, exciting, adventurous place for Mars to be. There's a lot of agreement on where we should go. What kind of activities should we do? What kind of learning? What kind of growing? What kind of breaking new ground should there be? So we encourage each other greatly with Mars in the 9th house. We can over-encourage each other, look to see if Mars is in a difficult aspect to Jupiter, and we could see some inflation of that, that encouragement, and sometimes that can push us a bit overboard. But, look to see. Usually it's just a very... it's a very warm place to have Mars, because it's like what the one person is excited by, what they jump up and spontaneously react to. It's infectious to the other person. They jump up and they want to do that too. So there's a lot of get up and go. More chances that the two people will grab onto available opportunities. It's considered a lucky place to have Mars because the two people act on what adventures and opportunities and options present themselves. They act on that very spontaneously and very bravely. So Composite Mars in the 9th house does make it more likely that we will be able to identify and go after what it is that can make us mutually grow and gives us a sense of happiness or purpose. With Composite Mars in the 10th house, goals and ambitions do tend to be a point of contention. What we are individually driven to go after is showing up in the context of the larger scope of the plan or the mutual goal in the relationship. So how we are individually reacting and responding, and how we individually win in life, it can be very different than what the combination of personalities in the relationship is really looking for. So it's like the two people have different ideas about supremacy and how they're going to affirm themselves and how they're going to reach out into the world and get what they want. That can be very different from what we have decided we are doing together. So there can be mutual agreement on, where are we going? What are we going to do? What is this going to be about? But the ways in which we individually respond to that can be quite rebellious. So it's like we've decided that, well, this is what we have to be because this is how we combine. But yet the two people tend to act on their own counter to what that agreed upon goal was. So it's more difficult to achieve something mutual when we have composite Mars in the 10th house. If we have very, very good cooperative aspects to Mars, that can increase the likelihood that we will be able to sort of put our own personal needs, or our personal need to affirm ourselves or to prove ourselves, able to put that on the back burner in order to achieve more of what we've agreed upon is going to be, the goals of the relationship. That can be easier if we have very, very easy aspects to Mars, if we have a cooperatively aspected Mars. It's the cooperation in general, the mutuality of where we're combining our energy, that it tends to be the issue when composite Mars comes into the 10th house. Composite Mars in the 11th house is a really wonderful placement. It ensures that the two people will work together to accomplish the individual's goals. So they don't have the same goals. They don't have the same ideas about personal fulfillment and what they want, but the two people want to help the other person achieve or get whatever it is that they personally want. So it's a very selfless place for Mars to be. We want to put our energy into seeing the other person be happy, and that's what makes us happy. And so if there are differences in what we want, and actually very much of the time there's a lot of things that are the same. There's more that's the same that's different than is different with composite Mars in the 11th house. We do want a lot of the same things, and would pursue spontaneously a lot of the same kinds of excitement and hobbies, and just what gets our blood rushing. But whatever differences that do exist there between the two of us, we're happy to help the other person to pursue that or get what they want. And there does tend to be a very good amount of reciprocity, getting the same amount of attention back, or the same amount of energy that we put into helping the other person get what they want, getting that back, and feeling like there's a really good give and take between the two of us. So it's a very friendly place for Mars to be. We like each other with composite Mars in the 11th house. So it does contribute to attraction. We're very excited by each other. We feel like the other person brings more options and opportunities into our life. They offer us a lot with composite Mars in the 11th house, but we also are friends. Composite Mars in the 12th house is a more difficult place to have it, because we often don't know how we're combining what we're going after, what the sources of irritability or ego conflict are. There's a type of confusion or mystery when Mars comes into the 12th house. So the lack of definition or clarity makes it more likely that we'll have passive aggression come up between the two of us. So 12th house contents in general are where we are sending out energy, signaling to the world. We're leaking in ways that we do not understand. So it's like if you're sitting around a poker table and you have tells in your behavior that give away what's going on internally, what they can tell, what cards you're holding by what you express. That's very similar to how Mars in the 12th house expresses. There's tells between the two of us, but there isn't a real concrete understanding of what is the other person asking for us and what is it that we want of the other person. So our selfishness isn't well known with Mars in the composite 12th house. It's a more unusual place to have it in long-term functioning romantic relationships, because the demands that we place on each other are often not clear. They're not defined. We'll make a lot of assumptions. We will have a lot of ideas about what we're going to get from the other person, what they should be, what kind of desires they should be satiating in us. But there isn't generally a really good, concrete idea of what the give and the take actually is between the two of us. So we have to ask for clarity. We have to ask very specific questions. We have to want to know. With Composite Mars in the 12th house, we have to want to know, what is it that the relationship is about? What is it that we're pursuing together? What is it that we both want to combine to win at? We have to gain clarity when it comes to those questions. So, what is it that breathes life into the relationship? We can actually not even know that. We cannot have the answers to what are we doing together. We can think that we have those answers, but as we spend more time together, we leak more. We have more of who we really are start to come out, and the other person has to accept that and acknowledge that, and that's going to be very different than what they thought they were getting. So there's quite a lot of cognitive dissonance that can come into a relationship when we have Composite Mars in the 12th house. Now, some people can work through that and can, over the course of time, really realize who the other person is, what their objectives really are, what the content of their selfishness, the nature of their selfishness really is. How is it that they're really truly immature? But we have to do some digging and sort out some mysteries when we have Composite Mars in the 12th house.